must constantly look at things in a different way.
The Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast was created by two physical therapists out of the desire to learn more about the different educational roles in physical therapy and healthcare, and how healthcare education works by talking with educational leaders and people with different perspectives within physical therapy and across interdisciplinary lines on how education can be improved to disrupt the status quo of healthcare education. This is our journey, and thanks for listening. Are you a third-year physical therapy student that excels on tests when you have study guides, checklists, and deadlines? With all of the information available about how to prepare for the NPTE, it's easy to get disorganized and not feel prepared going into the big day. NPTE Prep Success is an online course that provides PT students easy-to-use study guides and step-by-step guidance through the NPTE preparation. To learn more, visit kylericeprep.com. Thank you again all for your continued support, and now for the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, F. Scott Fiel, and I'm joined by my co-host, Stephanie Wyrock, and we have a special guest host tonight, baseball expert and one of Brandon Pone's co-workers, Alex Famadou. We're excited today to bring you not one, but two authorities and experts in the world of baseball and the biomechanics of throwing and hitting. Driveline's in-house physical therapist, Terry Phillips, and Sam Briend, Driveline's lead floor trainer. So guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. Would you mind telling our audience a little bit about your academic and educational journeys and how they led you to where you are today?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, first off, thanks for having us on the show. It's a pleasure to be on, and Sam and I have been excited about this for a long period, ever since you guys asked us to be on. My journey's kind of started, just playing baseball my whole life. And then my first 2 years of college were spent at junior college, where I was actually a really mediocre pitcher. And the end result of that was my second labrum surgery, which kind of leads you to figure out how I got into PT in the first place. After that, I went to Ithaca College in Central New York, where I got my doctorate of physical therapy in 2009. And then shortly thereafter, I moved out to Seattle, where I started working in a outpatient clinic, where I got a chance to work with a lot of athletes, a lot of kids who had stress fractures in their spines, many of which were baseball players. In 2016, I started working at Driveline on a part-time basis, just doing 1 day a week. And then last year, around June this time, I transitioned there to a full-time role.
Yeah, my background is somewhat similar to Terry's. I feel like everybody at Driveline has kind of a similar story like that. That's how we all kind of came together. But I was playing college ball. I was an RA college player, Division III. I had a labrum surgery in college as well, and I kind of pursuing, I was just, if I could get to the next level, if I could find somebody who could actually teach me, there's got to be a coach. And went on, played some independent ball after that, had another surgery while I was in the independent leagues. That kind of ended my career more or less. So I came back and decided to give back, try to get into coaching, help the kids, because I felt like I never had that coach that drove me forward. We were just too thin to be in Division III. So I went back to the Division III I was at, coached there for 5 years. We had a strength coach at the time. I also became the strength coach for the university there. Went back, got my master's degree while I was coaching, kind of doing all that at once. And then I was coaching in the Northwest when Driveline reached out to me and offered me a job. And that was kind of how I ended up at Driveline.
It sounds like you guys both had some unique journeys to get to Driveline. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what Driveline is and specifically what both of you do within Driveline with the athletes?
Yeah, so Driveline, we used to kind of be known as the Velocity people, the Velocity Farm, whatever people wanted to call us. And we're really more of total athlete development. We do a little bit of everything, whether it's you come in, you're recovering from an injury, you've been cleared by your PT, you want to do your rehab with us. Obviously, Terry takes care of a ton of that. But we do rehab, we do pitch design, we do velocity development, everything we can to help athletes based on where they are in their career, what they're needing with strength. So my job there, I'm a lead floor trainer, but my big focus is on athlete results and obviously developing our staff. We're very heavy on continuing education, so we're always kind of striving to keep furthering knowledge. That's one of the things Driveline's based on. Our slogan is data driven, so we're very research oriented. All of our staff is kind of develop. And that's a little bit of what we do there.
Yeah, and my role, kind of have a couple main roles. One is, each athlete comes in for a 3-day assessment, And within that assessment, they see me for a full physical therapy exam where I just assess their entire body. I check the toe and see if basically they're capable of, if their body is capable of doing what like Sam or one of our strength coaches or our hitting coaches or our throwing coaches are asking of them. Once I do my exam, then we coordinate with with Sam or the strength coaches and the rest of the trainers, and basically develop like a plan for the athlete to basically get the most out of their time spent here. Once we do that, then the athlete essentially has full-fledged access to me at no extra charge as part of the training fee. And I generally, obviously I don't want them to see me like every single day or like even 3-4 days a week. But if I feel like they need to see me a couple times a week or just once a week, then I definitely encourage that, not just like keep them healthy, but ideally to help their performance. And even if an athlete is doing pretty well, I still encourage that they see me like every 3 to 4 weeks just to kind of retest things and make sure everything's going well. They're not like starting to develop any deficits.
That's awesome. I feel like that's a Driveline because you guys are all like talking and you guys are integrating what Terry knows, what Sam knows, what the floor trainers, and making that one whole thing instead of, okay, Terry knows something, but Sam doesn't know. You don't want that to, happen. I feel like that's the great thing about Driveline. But that also segues to my question, which is talking about, I feel like the company has done from the outside job, providing via the interwebs, a whole bunch of media. But can you tell us about the new software that you got and how that the physical therapist, the floor trainer solves an integral part of Driveline?
Yeah, so we're actually really excited about the software. We've been using Google Sheets, and like you were talking about, the integration piece, it was just really difficult to kind of mesh all that together to see like meaningful output from all the data. So the software program just has everything, and it's constantly evolving based off what we need, based off as we use what they need, just so we can kind of make it an all-inclusive baseball training tool that actually spits out meaningful data. So there's like machine learning where you constantly feed in all that data, we're collecting it, we see how things work together, see how the strength program affects the throwing program, how Terry's data affects injury rates and things like that in the gym, and how everything kind of comes together and actually meshes, because nobody's really done that. Whether it's Major League Baseball, college, like there's not many organizations who actually take all the data and put it all together to see what's happening. And we now have that centralized place that can really kind of provide better feedback and drive athlete programming and results. So hopefully down the road, as this gets better and better and we kind of turn the wheel more and more and clean things up, we start seeing some really interesting and cool things start happening with the software and how it drives our athletes.
For those of our audience who maybe aren't aware, what would you guys say are some of the most common clinical conditions that a PT will generally see in college and MLB players? Of course, realizing this is patient specific, but what would you recommend as some of the best guidelines and things to work on for these common conditions?
Yeah, so most common injuries you're going to see, obviously you're going to see a lot of arm injuries, predominantly at the elbow and at the shoulder. At the elbow, you're probably the most common one you're going to see is actually just like a flexor bundle strain, which is where like the flexor pronator mass attaches at the medial epicondyle of the elbow. You may also pretty commonly see some posterior elbow pain. Up the shoulder, you're going to get some irritation at the biceps tendon, at the rotator cuff tendon, or even at the lat attachment as well too. In more severe cases, we're seeing guys who are coming off surgery that, if the shoulder is generally going to be like a labrum irritation or maybe like a subacromial decompression. At the elbow, in the most severe cases is Tommy John surgery, or on other times you're going to see like a elbow just have an arthroscopic surgery to basically clean up loose bodies or any bone spurs that may be. Getting away from the elbow, probably the most common thing that you see across all baseball players is back issues. These guys have been rotating throughout their spines in a lumbar spine that generally is not designed to rotate, and they're doing it, thousands of times a week, tens of thousands of times throughout the course of the year, and have been playing for 10, 15, 20 years, and their backs have kind of just taken a bit of a beating. So that might not necessarily be that they are like severely limited and that they can't perform their sport to the best of their abilities, but it may just be like a chronic ongoing thing where, in some guys it's limiting, but other guys just something that they've learned to deal with. So taking that into account, when you're working with baseball players, kind of thing that I really try to remind myself, and especially even just, even working with arm injuries, is that baseball players are going to be very neurologically driven. And what I mean by that is that they're constantly reinforcing patterns with like the asymmetrical activity that they're doing, that their brain is just basically going to hold them into a pattern where their muscles aren't going to be able to like recruit to the best of their abilities, or their joints might not be in the most optimal position where they can move through a full range of motion. And that may be precipitating like an arm injury where, they just don't have strength in the rotator cuff or strength in their scap, or their hip mobility may be limited, which further again like leads into other injuries. Additionally, too, and going back to guys having to rotate through their spines for a long period of time, they may have done so to the point where they've stressed their spines enough where they might basically like their nervous system might now be like kind of like a little bit of like a heightened awareness, where like they may have like inhibited muscles in the legs or on the upper body. They may have restricted range of motion throughout the spine or the hips or even up into the neck. And as a result, again, their bodies are just not able to do what like throwing or hitting is asking them. So you don't necessarily need to fix like the patterns or fix like their back issues, but you definitely need to be aware of it. And you can't just go and like have a guy do like a bunch of Job exercises and not be aware of that they probably got that rotator cuff weak for a reason, and then just expect that rotator cuff is going to get better.
So the reason why I'm really interested in what you guys are saying is because I am a huge baseball fan. Both Brandon and I love the Chicago Cubs. Scott and Alex are Mets fans. At least they're not Yankees fans like somebody else on this call. But, as a baseball fan, one of the things that I'm always concerned with is who's going on the disabled list. So, recently Anthony Rizzo went on the disabled list for the Chicago Cubs for a back injury. And one of the things that I always find so interesting about athletes and about me as a sports fan is thinking to myself, man, like I really want Rizzo to get back out there. How bad can his back injury actually be that he has to be on the disabled list? So one of the things that I'm really curious about is what types of things do you educate your overhead athletes on, or any type of throwers when it comes to injury and rehabilitation to try to get them back as quickly as possible? Because we could be talking about quite a bit of money here.
Yeah, the biggest thing, at least from my standpoint as a floor trainer, and I'll let Terry speak more to some of the PT stuff, but it's just the importance of a real warm-up and recovery. Like that's one of the biggest things we stress, even when we implement Driveline at schools or facilities for the first time. Usually we don't roll out the full program. Usually we're not rolling out all the weighted balls and stuff. It's the warm up and the recovery. Because we've had pro pitchers come in who they'll tell you they've done nothing their entire career, and now they're 30 years old, and their whole warm up was, I would just kind of jog a little bit. I'd go out there and play a little light catch, throw about 50 to the pen, go, and there would be no cool down, no recovery protocol afterwards. They just did nothing.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and then luckily baseball's changing, but that's that's how I would. You grow up playing catches like a 4-year-old up, and all you did to warm up was you just threw the ball a couple times and you just – baseball never really had that real warm-up recovery protocol.
I know that Ken Griffey Jr. has been famous in the past for having very minimal warm-ups and cool-downs, and he's always such a natural athlete, and so he would totally take advantage of that. And look, he was always a great athlete, but just think about how much more thorough his career could have been and how much greater he could have been if he would have taken advantage of his body at such a young age. I find this fascinating.
Yeah, it's really unreal, especially because baseball, just the demands of the sport, you tend to see a lot of hypermobile athletes. So they already kind of feel warm just because they're always loose. So they're not doing anything to like prep or create that stability that they need to actually do things safely. So that's where you kind of see potentially some injuries come in. And it's frustrating that a lot of stuff could just be sidelined with a good warm up and a recovery program.
I don't think that's specific to just high level athletes though. Look at how many of our patients, go home and don't do their home exercise program, right? Pretty typical stuff. We know what to do. We know the right stuff to do. We're just not doing it. And that is really, to me, the biggest issue a lot of times when you get into getting some of these people better quicker.
Oh, for sure. In general, in any kind of athletic stuff, even my father, he loves to run. He'll go run marathons and whatnot, but he doesn't do any warm-up stuff before it. He just hops out there and runs. And that's just kind of how sports have been taught for so long. And we're just not able to do that, especially as you age.
Yeah, and to piggyback off Sam, you guys are kind of already hit the nail on the head as far as like from my perspective, guys need to be educated on like, yeah, while you're seeing me, it's obviously you need to do your home exercise program, but like you need to keep up with like your home exercise program even when you're feeling awesome. Baseball, like hitting and pitching are some of the most complex and violent, aggressive motions that humans are capable of on the planet. And if you're trying to do it as often as they're doing it day after day, if there's some type of like weakness or like essentially a leak in the kinetic chain, then it's just a matter of time before they have some type of breakdown. And an easy analogy to think about is if you have a Maserati, you're not going to just take it into the shop like when the car has an issue. No, you're gonna put an investment in that car. You're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of money to make sure that car runs smoothly. And your body, not necessarily every guy, but you're trying to make your body a Maserati. And if you're not doing the things to take care of it, then it's just, again, it's a matter of time before you're back in seeing me or back on the trainer's table. The other thing I like, kind of further piggyback off that is just the importance for guys to like do their recovery work and not necessarily just like do their the proper cool down, but just take into account like you need to sleep well, you need to hydrate well, you need to eat well. A couple days a week, especially for the throwers, guys are trying to throw 95, 100 miles an hour multiple times, and that is severely taxing on like their body, on their nervous system. And if they just go home and they're just like playing video games and like stimulating their whole body, and they're just having some beers, and then they're just like just crushing pizza rolls, then they're not going to be able to throw 100 miles an hour the next time they want to. So just really harping on them about make sure like, yeah, you feel good, but you need to keep yourself feeling good so you can go do the same thing next time you go out.
So Terry, what I'm hearing is Matt Harvey shouldn't be out partying, and he could be a better pitcher potentially. Is that what I'm hearing?
How deep do we want to go into the Mets issues tonight?
I think that's a whole nother podcast episode, man.
Well, I think that, what you're saying, Terry, about once you get a home exercise program from a physical therapist, whether you're a professional athlete or a weekend warrior or someone who doesn't exercise at all, I think that maintaining that lifetime commitment to those couple of exercises that are your back healthy, your shoulder healthy, those are so important. And I know as a physical therapist, I too stress that to my patients, and I tell them, I'm here for you if you need me, but if you do these exercises a couple times a week, the chances of you coming back here are a lot less. So I really like that you stress that to these athletes because, as a professional athlete or as a really good pitcher or baseball player, it's probably really easy to think you're invincible.
Yeah, again, that's another podcast where guys just think, yeah, I throw 95 miles an hour. Like I've never had an injury before. Like I'm good to go. But again, you still need to invest in the time and in your body to like get the consistent output over years and years and years.
You guys do a good amount of in-house research in order to educate your patients. Can you tell us about that process and what research you're doing currently and what kind of pipeline could be in for the future?
Yeah, so the in-house research is something Kyle Bodie is super passionate about, and we have a fairly large staff research team now to kind of help turn that wheel a little bit. So we should have, I'm actually really excited for the first one, just that was one that I kind of started the spearhead with, a kettlebell waiter walk study. Just kind of, we talk about it all the time, and we always assume certain exercises are actually activating certain things. And different places do them a little bit differently, where like we've seen people do waiter walks at 90 degrees abduction, 45 degrees, 120, whatever it is. So we decided to do a study just to check serratus anterior activation of a kettlebell waiter walk, which was the first one we're going to be rolling out. We have a 6-week weighted ball study that's coming out where we had athletes from last summer. When they came in, they went into the motion capture lab, took all kinematics and kinetics of them there, and then 6 weeks later after training, ran them back through it to see kind of what had changed and what our program is actually doing, to kind of help educate people about what like the positive and negatives of weighted balls are, what the side effects potentially could be. So we have that one in the works. The kettlebell study is on its second revision. We're about to submit the 6-week study for its first revision. And then we have a few more coming down the line depending on how it goes. Weighted ball mountain velo, potentially modus, checking out the modus sensors a little more. And then there's a few more, a bench press study and some other stuff that we're looking at. do this summer when we have a bigger volume of athletes.
All right, guys. One thing that we are seeing more and more at earlier age, the Tommy John surgery. Can you explain to our audience, not be familiar with the procedure, or what it is and why it's happening?
Yeah, so Tommy John is, if you want to start the fear of God in any pitcher, just let them know that or just tell them that you think they might have to get Tommy John, because that is a very big deal. So what is it? The surgery itself is repair of the ulnar collateral ligament, which is the main passive stabilizer on the inside part of the elbow. And the inside of the elbow during the throwing motion event essentially takes the brunt of the force. Now, through proper strength conditioning and through proper kinematics, the ligament itself the force in that elbow can basically be dispersed. But if someone is not properly conditioned, or if they're pitching through fatigue and their muscles basically aren't working to the best of their abilities, or if they have some faulty pitching mechanics, then ligament can essentially just take more of that force. And if you're putting that force on it, enough times over the course of a season, a year, career, then that ligament can eventually just snap and tear, and then the recovery process is 12 to 16 months for most guys. It's been well documented recently that there's been a rise and an uptick in the amount of surgeries that are needed across especially obviously major league pitchers, but even down to youth pitching. I think that you can pinpoint to a lot of different reasons, but kind of the common one that comes back around often is that just the amount of workload that young pitchers are taking in their throughout their early careers. I remember when I was throwing, when I was a pitcher in high school, in my later years of high school, I was pitching at most, or I wasn't pitching, but I was playing at most 50, 60 games a year. But now it's not uncommon for 12, 13, 14-year-olds to be playing 70, 80, 90 games a year. And A, their bodies just are not developed enough for that. And B, a lot of the players, the parents, the coaches can very often just get short-sighted with their goals and be like, okay, yeah, it's really important that we win this tournament that 8 other teams are playing in this weekend. So we're going to send out our best guy who probably throws harder than other guys, which is going to be a little more stressful to begin with on the elbow. And now we're going to make him throw 200 pitches over the course of over 3 days. And that week in itself isn't going to necessarily tear the UCL, but if that's kind of the regular occurrence over the course of a season or several years, then later on down the road they just have a weakened UCL, and they just at some point they just throw the right pitch under the right circumstances, and then that just snaps.
So guys, what advice would you give to a newer clinician who's about to start working with the baseball population?
So I would say, kind of going back to the kind of neurological drivers that I talked about in the previous question is, obviously important for all baseball players and for clinicians to realize, but kind of more, simple terms, especially guys who are dealing with the higher level athletes as far as, college or pro baseball players, is you shouldn't have the expectation that guys are going to feel good every single day that they walk out there. Maybe the first few days of a camp or the first few days they're training through, they might feel good. But, like I mentioned before, they're doing some of the fastest motions on the planet multiple times a day. And they're, especially at our facility or at other training facilities, a lot of those guys are trying to do those motions faster or harder. And they're going to feel like garbage consistently. So it's important to know that fine line of okay, are they actually hurting something? Are they on the verge of having a tissue injury? Or are they just are their bodies just worn down because they're trying to push themselves so much? So you don't want to develop you want your athletes to develop a dependency on you because they just feel like they're something's wrong. And then if our clinicians are going to be working with younger athletes, whether it's high school or early college, it's great to for a guy that has no mobility deficits, or their posture is great, or they have great pitching mechanics. Yes, that stuff is important. But if you take a pitcher who's has all that stuff, but he's throws 85 miles an hour, he's 140 pounds, he can't bench more than 115 pounds, and then when you ask him to do a squat, he looks like he just learned how to walk. That kid does not have the physical capacity to throw as hard as he's throwing as much as he needs to throw. So it's not necessarily the PT's job to get them on like a weight training program, but you need to have the resources, whether it be a good strength coach that you trust or know a good training facility that you can send to so they can actually get their bodies capable of handling those forces that pitching or hitting places on them.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me is just teaching guys to be self-sufficient a little bit here. Obviously, most teams have 1 to 2 trainers. I think at the big league level, there's 3 on most teams to handle 25 guys, and it's just not enough to be able to. And you also don't just want to babysit the guys. So if you can, whenever you do something with them, whenever you work with them, just teaching them to be a little more self-sufficient, because most guys don't know. Guys don't understand anatomical terms and baseball, there's so much compensation wherever you go. Like oftentimes the point of injury, whether it's the bicep or forearm, whatever like the common sites are, usually those, unless it's something really acute, it's purely compensation. The bicep's not actually, like if you reduce the inflammation there, that's not going to clean up the injury long term because there's something else that's compensating for it to cause that bicep to take over more load. So just teaching guys to be self-sufficient and just like a little bit of continuing education. I know that's hard too when it's 3 of you trying to teach 25 guys, but it goes a long way and it also helps balance the workload and helps guys understand, going back to the importance of a good warm-up and a recovery protocol.
You know, I always have told people that if I wasn't a physical therapist, my dream job would be to be a baseball announcer. And working with baseball players seems like a very glamorous job. I think I would be starstruck every day if I was in your guys' position. I mean, especially at the major league level. But, you know, with every job, there's some drawbacks. Are there any drawbacks to working with this population?
Yeah, it definitely is fun working with the major league guys. You learn really quick. Like, I mean, we've had Trevor Bauer in there, Tim Lincecum, and they're just like everybody else. They're just regular guys. Like Tim's won 2 Cy Youngs, and you expect him to be like so much different than everybody else, and he's just a regular guy who's really, really good at his job. But there are some drawbacks. The higher level you get, the more these athletes have done this for so long. Especially in baseball, there's so many internal cues that they're just hyper aware of where their body is, or at least where they think their body is, right? Because feel is not always real. So they think they know all these things, and sometimes you've had a guy who's done it for 30 years, and you're working with him and trying to make changes and trying to change that thought process sometimes is very difficult, even though you know taking an athlete down a certain road would make him a lot better versus if you kept doing what he's always done. But it's difficult. There's some tough times trying to bounce back and forth with a guy who's just been doing it for so long.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback off of what Sam said is that we do, you know, a lot of the pro guys have been playing baseball and pitching and hitting for such a long period of time. And with that, they've seen, you know, from my end, they've seen a lot of different like rehab professionals. And, you know, many of them will have like preconceived notions as to what physical therapy is, who it's for, and what it should be. And so you may get some guys who just aren't receptive to what like I'm trying to tell them, you know, whether they think that PT is only for guys who are hurt, or if they think that all PT is just a bunch of eyewash that's just, like, you know, is not worth their while. There will be the guys from time to time who just aren't going to listen to what I have to say. You know, best I can do is just obviously educate them and, you know, give my rationale for why I think they need this. But at the same time, you need to pick and choose your battles. You know, so with that said, though, it's like, you know, at our facility, guys come to our facility like seeking our information out. We don't reach out to guys and say, hey, you should come see us. It's not like, you know, at an outpatient clinic where like their doctor told them they need to come, you know, they need to go physical therapy. You know, guys come seeking to us like you look for some type of answer. So generally, most of the guys that come to see us are very perceptive and looking for some type of answer to how to get better. So there's not too much of a battle generally, but you still will get the guy from time to time who just thinks he knows everything there is to know about how to rehab his body or keep his body healthy. But I mean, you guys know that's not any different from working at a general outpatient clinic anyways, where you'll get like a 65-year-old lady who just refuses to do anything you tell her anyways.
All right. Can you guys tell us a little bit about the facility setup and how you guys are using equipment such as like K-Vest in conjunction with your software and how to implement like throwing programs?
Yes. So K-Vest our hitting side is demoing that right now. They're using it as part of their initial assessment when hitters come in. The big pieces on the throwing side, obviously, are the motion capture, the Rapsodo. We use Edgertronic cameras. And then the software kind of takes all of that data. So what we used to do manually, like say Trevor, when he first came in, Trevor's a very slow twitch athlete. Like he has to do a lot of work. You saw his like 116.9 mile an hour, 3-ounce throw pre-live ABs, but he has to do that stuff to always keep up the arm speed and make himself a little more explosive, a little more fast twitch, just to prime everything and get it going. And those were things we used to do by very manually do the mocap work, watch his training, assess how like his spreads and the weighted balls and things were, and then adjust from there. And as software goes and as machine learning gets better and better, you put a guy you take all those metrics from Rapsodo, from mocap, from everything, and it comes in there, and we'll be able to look at it and be like, all right, very easily, like this guy needs to do more under load work. This guy needs to do more overspeed work. We need more strength work here. It's just kind of meshing those all together. The pitch design stuff's really fun. Rapsodo's been great. We're hoping to have that just drop straight into the software like a lot of the other pieces are going to be able to do. And then using the Edgertronic cameras, obviously, you guys have probably seen those. A lot of the major league teams are starting to pick up on that and buy those as well. It's just awesome to be able to see how like a ball comes out of their hand, just see finite, like very, very important details that we can use to design pitches, change an athlete's career, kind of like what Trevor did this offseason, developing that slider. And you look at him right now, I think he's rolling with a 2 ERA. I mean, in the past, he's been sitting at about, I think it's like mid-4s ERA, and his stats are almost identical to Kluber's this year because of what some of that technology was able to allow him.
Yeah, and then from my end of things, I don't get – the guys aren't going to come in with like the Rapsodo data or like the Edgertronic data, but, ideally we're going to start implementing as we utilize the motion capture a bit more, is that we can identify, where guys are not the most efficient throughout their throwing motion. And then through my evaluation, my examination, see, okay, is this like a mobility, a stability issue? Is this like some type of neurological issue that I can help work on? Or is this something that they just need to do more on the strength conditioning side of things? But just utilize my services use my services to be guided by the motion capture report that we're doing.
That's awesome. I think that directly goes into our next question. And Sam, you recently wrote an article in April about player development, integration, and communication for better results. Can you explain to our listeners how your role directly enhances that process?
Yeah. So as lead floor trainer, my role is kind of just integrating everything. It was one of the issues I first saw when I was first hired to Driveline about 2 years ago. And it's one thing that just the baseball community and really sports in general struggles with. It's very easy to get siloed into your own department. Especially when you're kind of in different places too, like the weight room has its own place, the throwing floor has its own place, physical therapy, manual therapy, all that stuff kind of usually happens in its own place. So it's very easy to just get caught up in your own little world there and not really provide feedback, not really give enough of just not having enough communication to actually drive athlete results. So that's kind of my role on the floor, is just make sure all those sides are communicating, or make sure all that's flowing between each other. Because if you have a guy, say an athlete comes in and he's having an issue, his velocity's down, his lead leg looks funky, and a trainer keeps providing cues for him, but it doesn't change it. Well, then we can take him, Terry can assess him, we can see how his nervous system's working, how that may impact how his lead leg works, and then the strength staff can assess him too and be like, well, we're missing range of motion, Terry can do some stuff to clean up range of motion, manual therapist can do some stuff to do that. Strength side will strengthen him, and then as we clean up that range of motion, the actual cues that the throwing trainer is providing will actually improve the actual athletic movement. Where before, like if the kid just couldn't do it, you just kept doing it, and coaches would get frustrated and they'd be like, well, he just doesn't listen. They would call him a bad trainee or a bad athlete, and it's terrible. Like there's probably been thousands upon thousands of kids' careers who've been ruined that way because people didn't understand the whole total picture and was just like, well, I said do this, he can't do it, which internal cues by themselves are just kind of ridiculous. Like it's very, very difficult to change a movement pattern. And that's why we believe in the weighted balls and the constraints. They help build velocity, yes, but a lot of it's just from moving better. Like you need those constraints. You need the heavier balls, you need the lighter balls, you need the drill work, you need the weight room work, the PT work, because all that helps build better movement. You just can't do it by yourself. It's really difficult.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, as physical therapists, we are movement system experts, and movement is an important part about what we do, and making sure that people are not only optimally moving, but moving to the best of their sport can handle. So I really love that point that you made, because I think a lot of people just maybe don't think about that, and sometimes it's really hard for people to understand how it takes time to learn motor control. I mean, it's like learning a brand new musical instrument or a new piece of music. You have to practice it hundreds and hundreds of times in order to get it perfect. Do you guys have any books that you would recommend or that you've read that you've really enjoyed, that you feel like our clinicians, our audience, clinicians, students, academicians, pretty much anybody in our audience would really benefit from reading?
Yeah, this one's not so much like subject matter as it is kind of going back to the integration and the communication I just spoke about. I just finished a book called Leaders Eat Last that just kind of talked about, it's very easy to be dialed into your athletes. Like I said, it's very easy to have a relationship with them, to be really focused on them. But that communication between staff, like even just building culture. Culture to me is always a top-down thing. So it always starts with how you communicate to your trainers, how you communicate amongst each other, and then it boils down to the trainees. They see that, they realize this is how your facility, this is how your team, your program, whatever it is, this is how we do, this is how everybody top down does it. So they buy in. And this book really just kind of opens your eyes to some of the stuff that sometimes you forget about, because you get so caught up focused on just developing your athletes and that stuff that you kind of forget about your peers working beside you, and how important it is to share knowledge and things like that. Because a lot of times people too, especially the way industry and business is these days, is people don't like to share knowledge. You feel like if you have this knowledge that other people don't have, that you have job security, that you're going to be better than this guy. And really that's not what we want at Driveline. We want all our trainers sharing knowledge. Like I said, we're really big on continuing education. When they go out and do continuing education stuff, they have to come back and present on it, because we want to share that knowledge and grow our staff. And sometimes some organizations just don't do a great job of that. This book kind of helps bring a little bit of that to them.
I love what you said about culture. I think that culture is probably one of the most important aspects of an organization, and you can definitely tell what type of person to hire based on the culture, because if you have a culture mismatch, you're going to have a missing link in the chain. What about you, Terry? Do you have a book that you would recommend to our viewers?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go with the shameless plug for the company, but recommend Hacking the Kinetic Chain, which was originally written, I believe, 3 or 4 years ago by our founder, Kyle Bodie, and was actually just recently revamped by our head of pitching, Matt Daniels. And it's really just breaks down the pitching mechanics, breaks down the drills that we do, why we do them, gives a complete guide for programming, for long toss, for arm care, recovery, weightlifting. And it's just like a very good, a good guide for all pitchers of all ages to follow to help keep themselves healthy while also improving their performance. So if you get the chance, I said definitely recommend Hacking the Kinetic Chain.
Awesome, you guys. Well, we'd like to ask each of our guests this one final question, and I'd love to hear an answer from both of you guys. If you could change one aspect of higher learning, whether it be DPT or other healthcare education related, what aspect would you change, and how would you change it?
So this might seem like it's kind of getting away from baseball, but this actually applies very much to our trainees, just athletes in general. But I would really like to see more of a focus on the psychosocial aspects of patient care taught in PT school curriculum. I know at my college, we just really had one course on that topic. And it was, not to say that courses are more important than others, but it was one of those courses that kind of just got lost in the shuffle of things. And really, we weren't aware as students of how important that was to our careers. And it's something that I see with a lot of students who come out of school is that, yeah, they know the anatomy, they know how to program certain exercises, but they still kind of struggle with just building a relationship with the patient. And that's, you guys know, that's arguably the most important aspect of your treatment, is that you're going to sit down with that patient or that client and just show them that you care, and you're going to do everything you can in your power to help get them better, or in my case, help improve their performance so they can move on to the next level. Move on in their careers. So again, I would just really like to see that added to PT school's curriculum, in some aspect.
Yeah, and for me, I just find a lot of the times things are, whether it's mechanical or physical therapy stuff, things are broken down very micro. It's the easiest way to see things. Like, again, if forearm hurts, you go after the forearm. If you're trying to fix a movement pattern, you usually just like, all right, we're going to work arm action, we're going to work lead leg. And the body doesn't work like that. It's not pieces of a machine that you can just swap out here. There needs to be a little more emphasis on kind of the interaction of the parts and not just the parts themselves. That would be one of the biggest things, just from a coaching standpoint. It will help your athletes a lot if you treat it as a whole and not just.
Well, guys, those are tremendous. And I want to take this time to thank you guys so much for coming on and your time. Can you tell our audience, find you media, if they want to reach out to you and follow you up with questions?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at sbriend, that's BRIEND 97, or Instagram at just sbriend.
Yeah, and I'm also most available on Twitter too at tphillips_DPT. I also have Facebook and Instagram, but I'm not quite as active on those two. So if you want to, touch base with me on anything or discuss shop or hear some Buffalo Bills rants, Twitter is definitely the best way to go about that.
Well, awesome, guys. Thank you so much for your time. And I also want to give a special thanks to Alex for coming on and being a guest host for this. Guys, thanks again for your time. It was awesome talking with you tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This has been great. Always happy to talk shop.
Yeah, we really appreciate you guys having us on. This was a lot of fun.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast, as we greatly appreciate your support to help us advance healthcare education. We are very happy to announce that we have created a new tool to help develop clinicians into better experts. With that being said, we have created the HET Light tool, which LIGHT stands for Learning Integrated Towards Expertise. And what we've done is we've taken our first year's worth of episodes with experts in the fields of healthcare and education, and we've taken one golden nugget or theory on expertise and presented it to you in a very easily consumable format so that people can take one lesson or nugget per week and map out and plan how to incorporate it into your clinical and educational practices. And by the end of the year, we think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how far you've progressed towards becoming an expert. To find out more, please check it out at pteducator.com/HET, which is also available in our show notes. Thank you again all for your continued support. Thank you for attending class today, and we hope that you learned something and gained value from the content.
If you'd like to schedule office hours with us, feel free to add us on Twitter at HET Podcast, on Instagram, HET Podcast, on Facebook, the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast, and the homepage, healthcareeducationtransformationpodcast.com.
And for those of you following along in the syllabus, extra credit can be obtained by liking us, sharing us, and leaving a review.
Let's continue our journey up Mount Educational Success as lifelong learners.